I want to rescue an elephant as well. I want to.
Hello. This is the way.
Do you think wealthy people still prove their status with mansions, luxury cars, diamonds? No. Those things are now considered outdated. In 2026, the world is talking about quiet luxury. And ironically, the rappers below are the ones who kicked off that trend in ways no one saw coming. Some people raise tigers in their homes to assert power. Some spend more than 500,000 USD just to see someone who has passed away. Others turn their entire private property into a closed-off zoo, simply to enjoy peace on their own terms. You will never be able to guess what move the rich will make next. Today, we are not talking about hits or charts. We are talking about real-life flexes that actually happened. A story about money power and the true cost of glory. Rick Ross, Promised Land Zoo, and the heavy armored vehicle. Some rappers buy watches to tell time. Rick Ross buys a massive stretch of land in Georgia to see power. Not the kind of power shouted through lyrics, but the kind that lies still on the ground, spreading so wide that outsiders immediately understand whose territory they are standing on. Ross does not hide it. On the contrary, he openly calls the place Promised Land Zoo, sometimes even referring to it as an animal sanctuary, and posts it directly on social media, like a declaration of ownership. This is not just a mansion. This is a private kingdom, where Ross does not live like a touring artist chasing schedules, but like an old-school landowner stepping outside in the morning to see his assets breathing, running, and moving. At first, everything still sounds fairly normal by ultra-wealthy standards. Horses grazing in open fields, bulls raised as symbols of strength. Then come the buffalo massive animals that evoke the American West more than a rapper's lifestyle. But things hit another level when he posted a video saying he was preparing to bring in a lion and a lioness for Promised Land Zoo. This was not casual talk. Ross emphasized that he had prepared documentation permits and was in the process of applying for approval to raise even more species. At that point, the story moved far beyond a fun flex. It became a very clear message. This is my territory, and I am building it by my rules. But here is the issue. No matter how complete the paperwork is, lions, bison, and buffalo are still animals driven by wild instincts. And Ross understands that. Instead of scaling back his ambition, he chose to protect it. For security, Rick Ross did not hesitate to spend money on a bulletproof armored vehicle, something that looks like a mini tank. Thick metal, heavy body, a presence that feels pulled from a battlefield rather than a luxury driveway. The madness lies in the combination. On one side, open fields, wild animals, and space. On the other, steel armor and a defensive mindset. A modern landowner flex where farmland, zoo, and military hardware coexist on the same property. Picture Rick Ross standing in the middle of Promised Land. Behind him are animals that could become dangerous if control is lost. In front of him is a heavy armored machine ready to protect its owner. It feels like an action movie scene that wandered into National Geographic, both grand and deeply unsettling. Ross flexes with land-living creatures and steel. A very American flex, very Southern, very powerful. You think this is the wildest one yet? Not even close. Because next, you will see how money can make the dead feel alive again. Kanye West buying the ghost of his father-in-law. 500,000 USD. That is the estimated price of this surreal act. Not money for a car, not money for a house, but money to buy something. No ordinary life can purchase a moment with someone who has passed away. That gift appeared on Kim Kardashian's 40th birthday. Kanye did not give his wife diamonds nor a lavish trip. He built a projection, a high-tech illusion recreating the image of Robert Kardashian, her father, who had passed away nearly 2 decades earlier. Not archival footage, not an old recording, but a figure standing in front of her speaking, making eye contact as if time had been briefly reversed. On the surface, it is a beautiful gift. Very beautiful. Everything was staged like a carefully crafted film scene. Soft lighting, restrained camera angles, dialogue written to strike emotional pressure points. Kanye was not simply giving a gift. He built Kim a memory room, where the past was reconstructed with physical form, voice, and presence. a space where longing no longer lived in the mind, but stood right in front of the eyes. The reaction within the Kardashian family, at least initially, was almost entirely positive. Kim called it the most meaningful gift of my life. She shared that she, her sisters, and her mother watched the hologram over and over and cried their eyes out. For them, this was not a piece of technology. It was a private moment where family memory could be touched again in a tangible form. In that room, Kanye was not a rapper or a controversial figure. He was a husband trying to give his wife back something she had lost. But once the story left the family space, the tone immediately changed. On social media, the hologram was quickly turned into memes, clipped, remixed, and mocked. A wave of harsh criticism emerged, arguing that Kim and Kanye were showing off an excessively luxurious gift during the COVID-19 pandemic, when millions around the world could not visit their loved ones, or even say goodbye to those they lost. In that context, spending $500,000 to see the dead was viewed as tone-deaf and emotional flex out of sync with collective grief. And after everything, the question still hangs in the air. When everything can be recreated with money and data, does memory remain sacred, or does it become just another premium asset? But the flex game does not stop there. Because right after Kanye, someone chose a completely different direction. A flex so ordinary that they did not even want to roll their own blunt anymore. Waka Flocka Flame, hiring a professional blunt roller. You have heard of housekeepers, managers, nannies. But have you ever heard of a full-time professional blunt roller? It sounds like a joke line from a mockumentary sitcom, something like a hip-hop version of The Office. But no, this is real life. In 2014, Waka Flocka Flame took over social media not because of a hit record, but because of a job post that made the entire internet laugh, then stop and think. Waka was very direct. He needed someone to roll blunts for him. Not occasionally, not when bored, but full-time, on tour roll, at events roll, chilling with the team roll. The job sounded so simple that everyone thought they could do it. But Waka attached a salary that made people take it seriously, around $50,000 USD a year, a number that turned rolling weed from a personal habit into a position with a formal job title. The internet reacted exactly as you would expect. Laughter, shares, memes. But after a few hours, people started sending real applications. Very real. Thousands of messages flooded Waka's inbox. And not as jokes. Some people filmed videos proving their skills. Others wrote full resumes listing years of hands-on blunt rolling experience. According to the media, the number of applications reached the tens of thousands. Waka and his team even organized in-person auditions. No interview tables, no questions like strengths and weaknesses. Here the questions were very practical. Is it even? Is it fast? Can you keep the shape? Do you understand the ratio of weed to tobacco? No tools. Out. Bad roll. Out. Wrong style. Sorry, out again. It sounds funny, but that seriousness is exactly what makes it so satirical. Waka never treated this as a joke. He was buying absolute convenience, a level of wealth where you do not need to do the smallest tasks yourself, not because you cannot, but because you do not want to. The flex here is not about money. 50,000 USD is not shocking in rap circles. The flex is in the mindset. Waka turned a very ordinary, very personal action into a formal job title. A lazy but honest flex. I do not want to roll anymore. I hire someone to do it, and I call it a job. This is not flexing with watches or cars. This is flexing the right to be lazy. The right to live in a world where everything, even the smallest habit, can be outsourced. It sounds funny, but it is also very real. For some rappers, being rich is not about having more things. Being rich means never having to touch what you do not like. Waka Flocka Flame does not need to prove that he is luxurious. He only needs to prove one thing. When you have enough money, even rolling a blunt can become someone else's responsibility. Tyga, the notorious exotic pet flexer. Tyga was not outside the stream of unusual indulgences, like Rick Ross. If Ross chose hundreds of acres of open land to house his ambitions, Tyga took a tighter, more enclosed, and far more dangerous path. And that is where the line began to blur. In 2014, the most controversial incident was tied to a house Tyga was living in. in Calabasas, bordering Ventura County. Online, many people casually called it a rental, since Tyga had a history of renting homes in that area, and later facing rent-related lawsuits. But in the Tiger case that year, official documents and press reports mostly referred to it simply as a residence, the place where Tyga was living. No one truly cared whether it was owned or rented. What mattered was what was inside that house. On April 19, 2014, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife received an anonymous tip. The message was brief, but enough to change everything. There was a Bengal tiger inside Tyga's home. When wardens arrived to investigate, the house was quiet. No one was home. At that time, they did not see the tiger or any clear evidence. The story seemed like it might end there, like many vague reports before it. But it did not. Law enforcement did not leave. According to the Los Angeles Times, they stayed and waited. 7 hours passed. Night fell. Around 11 p.m., Tyga returned. When asked about the tiger, Tyga said he had taken it to a shelter in Ventura County earlier that day. The explanation was brief and direct, but not enough to close the case. Later, the tiger was confirmed to be about 7 months old, weighing nearly 100 pounds, and was transferred to a licensed facility. The specific location was not disclosed. Reports only noted that the animal's condition was stable. At this point, where the tiger was no longer mattered, the issue was why it had ever been in the house. In California, tigers are prohibited as pets. Owning such an animal can carry serious legal risks. And to further fuel the story, the media resurfaced images Tyga had once posted of a tiger sitting on a Rolls-Royce. An image too perfect for flex culture, and too perfect to avoid becoming public evidence. A tiger is not an accessory. It is not like a chain or a supercar. It breathes, it gets hungry, and it reacts on instinct. When a tiger appears in a home is no longer a private space. It becomes a temporary cage where a small margin of error can lead to disaster. And disasters do not care who you are, how famous you are, or how many stages you have stood on. Years later, people still mentioned the tiger's aftermath, including disputes over care costs and long-term responsibility. But that was only the edge of the story. If Tyga flexed with real predators placing risk directly inside his living space, then next comes someone who flexed in an even stranger way. Flavor Flav, the O.J. Simpson bronze statue that broke the internet. Some items are expensive because they are rare. Some are expensive because they are beautiful. And some are expensive because they make everyone uncomfortable the longer they look at them. Flavor Flav's O.J. Simpson bronze statue belongs squarely in that last category. Not something to show refinement, not something to decorate a room. It exists solely to remind people that some stories become harder to process the closer you look. Flavor Flav is not the type of rapper who flexes in familiar ways. He does not chase the newest supercars or the most expensive watches. Flav's flexes are always offbeat, slightly bizarre, much like his public image. So when people discovered he owned a full-size bronze statue of O.J. Simpson, the reaction was nearly universal. Why that? And why would anyone keep it? The statue was not made for Flav. It carried heavy history before reaching him. After events that shook the United States, O.J. Simpson's assets were auctioned off to resolve legal issues. Among those items, the full-body bronze statue appeared as an awkward object. Not because it was rare, but because it encapsulated a fallen icon, a face once celebrated and later buried under scandal. The statue's journey was just as strange. It passed through multiple intermediaries, spent time in the hands of a media figure, known for collecting controversial items, and eventually surfaced in Flavor Flav's collection. And here, the story took a very Flav-like turn. He did not hide it in storage. He did not tuck it away. He brought it into the open. Flav appeared on television bringing the statue along as an oddity. A statement of, "I own something no one dares to put in their living room." No lengthy explanation needed. Its presence alone was enough. A heavy bronze statue depicting a man America has never agreed on how to remember. A sports hero, or the symbol of a social tragedy. Everyone who looks at it carries a different feeling, and most of those feelings are discomfort. The statue's value does not lie in the bronze, not in the craftsmanship. It lies in its abnormality. It is like a trophy of dark pop culture, something no one wants to display, but everyone recognizes instantly. When Flav placed it in front of the camera, he was not just showing an object. He was showing the ability to own controversial history, as if saying, "I am bold enough to keep what others avoid." That is where the madness of this flex lives. Flexing with infamy is like hanging a controversial painting in your living room, not to enjoy it, but to see who can tolerate it. Every glance pulls in memories, arguments, and the exhaustion of a society once obsessed with this case for years. Flav does not shy away from that. If anything, he seems to enjoy the awkwardness it creates. And this story says a lot about the era that produced it. At some point, pop culture did not just consume music, movies, or fashion. It consumed scandal. Dark stories became commodities. Controversial symbols were bought, sold, and reused as a form of distorted entertainment. Flav simply acknowledged that more bluntly than most. Some believe Flav bought the statue for its collectible value. Others say he bought it to flip for profit. But regardless of motive, the result was the same. The statue became a mirror reflecting how society treats infamy, not burying it, not resolving it, but placing it on a shelf, turning it at different angles, and using it as something to talk about. Watching Flav stand next to the statue, it is hard to laugh comfortably. It is not like other playful flexes. It is heavy both literally and figuratively. A silent object carrying too much historical noise. And that silence is exactly what makes people uneasy. No explanation can soften it enough. If Rick Ross flexes with land power, if Tyga flexes with predators, if Kanye flexes with memory and technology, then Flavor Flav flexes with deviation. He does not try to make wealth look beautiful. He makes it hard to swallow. A flex that does not ask for anyone's approval. And perhaps that is the common thread of the most memorable flexes. They do not just show money. They force the viewer to confront a feeling. Surprise, discomfort, confusion. With Flav, that feeling is the awkwardness of staring directly at a symbol society still does not know where to place. If Flav bought something uncomfortable because of its history, then next comes someone who bought something uncomfortable in a different way. Not because of the past, but because it sat right on the face. Lil Uzi Vert, the $24 million diamond. Some people wear diamonds so others can look. Uzi attached a diamond so no one could look away. That was no longer jewelry. It was a proposition. A declaration embedded directly into the body where eyes are forced to stop whether they want to or not. The story began with a pink diamond said to be around 10 carats and the figure of $24 million that Uzi mentioned as a marker of patience. He explained that he paid for it over many years from the peak of touring to the moment the name Lil Uzi Vert became a brand. Not a single swipe of a card, but a long process. Long enough to turn the stone from a luxury item into a personal goal. While others saved to buy a house, Uzi saved to buy a diamond for his forehead. The moment Uzi appeared with the stone embedded directly in the center of his forehead, the internet froze. Not because of the sparkle, but because of the placement. The diamond sat there like a press here to see the price button. No caption needed, no explanation required. His body had become a living price tag. Every frame was a reminder that this was not meant to be subtle. It was designed for absolute attention. On the surface, it was a pure flex. No detours, no metaphors. But the closer you look, the more layers appear. Because embedding a diamond in the forehead is not like piercing an ear or wearing a chain. It carries real risk, impact, infection. The fragility of the human body against an inanimate object that is hard and sharp. One fall, one hard hit, what is called peak luxury could turn into a medical emergency in seconds. And here is where the insanity of the flex becomes clear. Uzi did not just buy an object. He turned his body into a display case, a moving museum where the most valuable piece sat at the center of his face. Flexing was no longer about showing what you own. It was about showing what you are willing to carry. Carry risk, carry attention, carry judgment. Some called it art. Uzi said he wanted to become a living work of art, a form that could not be copied or mistaken. In a world where everything is duplicated through filters and trends, the diamond on the forehead was his way of stamping copyright on himself. But that declaration came with a question even loyal fans could not avoid. Was it worth it? Because this luxury did not bring comfort. It did not help you sleep better. It did not make you move faster. It did not make you safer. It only made you more visible. And visibility in this world is both an asset and a burden. When you turn your body into a stage, you lose the right to step off without being watched. The story became even more ironic when Uzi later removed the diamond. No noise, no grand announcement, just a quiet move showing that the body has limits. Money can buy gemstones, but it cannot buy immortality. The moment the diamond left his forehead, many realized this was never permanent. It was a performance, a chapter in the flex journey of an artist always pushing boundaries. Looking back, the $24 million diamond is not just a story about money. It is a story about identity. Uzi placed value on his forehead as a way of saying, "I am something you must look at." But at the same time, it exposed the fragility of using the body as a symbol. When the symbol becomes too heavy, the body pushes back. This kind of flex is not for the majority. It is for those willing to pay with comfort, safety, and privacy. Uzi did that for a period of time, long enough for the world to talk, short enough to remind us that not everything that sparkles belongs on the body forever. Uzi pinned value to his forehead, turning his face into a declaration, a flex that made it impossible to look away. But right after that, the story shifts again. Because someone else did not pin luxury to the body. They pinned it to sleep, and the cost was no easier to swallow. Drake, $400,000 for a night's sleep. Some people dream the American dream. Drake dreams on something that costs as much as someone else's house. This is not a metaphor, not an exaggeration. It is a super luxury bed and mattress, set valued by the press at around $400,000 USD, built to serve one purpose only: sleep. In Drake's world, this is not an item meant to be shown off in public, not something that appears in a music video or gets dragged into the middle of a party. That bed stays still in the most private space he has, the bedroom, a place with no audience, no stage lights. And that is exactly what makes the story interesting. According to features on Drake's mansion, he owns a handcrafted bed set, considered among the most luxurious in the world. Every detail is done by hand, taking months, sometimes years to complete. The $400,000 price tag does not just pay for a mattress. It pays for the philosophy that sleep itself deserves to be treated as an elite privilege. On the surface, this is a very quiet flex. Drake does not stand next to it posing. He does not post captions bragging about the price. He simply lets it exist and lets others tell the story. But that silence is the clearest statement of all. This is the kind of flex from someone who has passed the stage of needing to prove anything. When you do not need people to know you are rich, but if they do find out, they instantly understand the level. The meaning here is not about comfort alone. Everyone wants good sleep. But no one needs a bed that costs as much as a house to get it. For Drake, sleep is no longer just a biological need. It becomes another stage of status, a place where even when the lights are off, the hierarchy does not disappear. The madness of this flex lies in its deliberate absurdity. Comfort is pushed into statement. Sleep, the most private and simple human act, is elevated into a symbol of financial power. As if Drake is saying that even when I am doing nothing, I am still living on a different level. This is a mature flex. Not loud, not instantly shocking like a diamond embedded in a forehead or wild animals in a house. But it is expensive enough to make people stop and think. How many people work their entire lives to buy a home? And here, that value is placed into an object meant only to lie on. And because of that, the story carries a very different tone. It does not make people laugh. It does not spark fierce controversy. It leaves behind a quiet feeling. A quietness of absolute abundance. When money is no longer used to show off but to optimize every private moment. Drake does not need to say anything else. The bed speaks for him. That at this stage, flexing is no longer about shouting to the world. Flexing is living in a way only those truly at the top understand. So in the end, why do they buy these things? For pleasure? For proof? Or to fill an invisible gap that stage lights never reach? And when you look back at all these flexes from start to finish, perhaps the answer is not in the objects. It is in the feeling they are trying to find. When the spotlight starts speaking in reverse. Looking back at these flex moments, sometimes you laugh. Sometimes you feel a chill down your spine, not because of the price, but because of the sense that somewhere behind these outrageous objects, a very real emptiness is showing through. The most obvious common thread
Videos
is that they
of
all buy
time,
things
making
far
comments
beyond
about
necessity.
specific groups.
No one needs a private zoo to live. No one needs a tiger in the house, a diamond on the forehead, a hologram of the dead, or a bed that costs as much as a house. These things are not born to serve utility. They are born to create moments. Moments that force the world to look whether out of
He was paying
admiration
close
or
attention.
confusion.
And in 2016,
If you look
Ye
closely, you can clearly see three types of flex. The first is flexing material power. Land wild animals steal. When Rick Ross turns a piece of Georgia land into a domain with animals and armored vehicles, he is not just showing money,
which led
he is
to the
showing
same Pablo
control
tour.
over space.
Ye on top
This
of
is
the
the
world.
flex of
Selling
someone
out
who wants to
shows
stand
all throughout
high,
the globe.
see far, and let everything below arrange itself according to his order. The second is flexing danger and shock. Tyga brings predators into his home. Lil Uzi Vert embeds a diamond directly into his forehead. These moves are not just expensive, they are risky. They place the body safety and even people nearby into danger
Ye would
zones.
wear a hat
Flexing
once
here
again.
is
to
no
one of
longer
the
about
biggest
showing what
comedy
you
shows in
have,
the world,
but showing
going
what
on
you are
what
willing
fans
to
call
endure.
the Wyoming run.
Willing to carry attention, willing to carry consequences, and sometimes willing to trade something away. The third is flexing cultural symbols and emotion. Kanye recreates the image of the dead. Flavor Flav keeps a statue tied to heavy scandal. Drake invests in luxury sleep.
America.
These moves do
What
not
is
shock
America's
immediately,
destiny?
but they linger. They do not shout, they whisper. And it is the whisper that makes people think. From these stories, a few things naturally emerge without needing to teach or conclude for anyone. Money can buy objects, but it cannot buy the feeling
Ye
of
wasn't
enough.
down in the dumps though.
After going through too much, people start buying feelings, buying difference, buying attention, and buying things that force others to react. What audiences remember most is sometimes not the number, not 24 million or 400,000, but the level of risk and the emptiness behind that risk. Because the bigger the flex, the more people wonder what it is trying to hide.
Starting the TikTok
Insecurity, emptiness, or simply the fear of being forgotten. There is also a slightly sad truth. In celebrity culture, silence can be scarier than being poor. When the lights go out, when the name is no longer mentioned, that emptiness
that
becomes
was mainly
deafening.
because Ye was out
So
of the
people buy things that are big,
a small,
strange,
like,
and
an
unforgettable
interview-
to drown out that silence. Not always consciously, but always with motive. Now it is your turn. Among all these flexes, which one feels legendary in a respectable way? And which one feels just crazy enough to be concerning? If you had
Ye
$1
visited a
million,
rabbi.
what would you buy to enjoy for yourself, not for others to see? A quiet space, a private experience, or a once-in-a-lifetime flex. There were times when people believed glamour was happiness. But the closer you
Kanye
look,
West is sharing
the
some
more
very
you see that
shocking,
glamour is
never-before-heard
sometimes just a
details about
thin coat of paint, covering sighs no one wants to hear. And at that point, the real question is no longer what they bought. It is what they are searching for in a world that has never stopped watching them.
We encourage viewers to approach the content with an open mind, critical thinking, and to always cross-reference with multiple sources in order to form their own perspective. That's the reality of the game. Fame always comes with a price. If you vibe with the content and want the real uncut stories, go ahead and smash that like button and subscribe to the Black Vault.